Well, hello and welcome everyone to this session of the EMS Leadership Academy's Recruitment and Retention live training workshop. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Lisa Geritzi here. Happy to be here. Looking forward to this final training that we're doing, or at least that we have scheduled for this year on this particular topic.
Absolutely. Folks, if the audio sounds okay, just give us an okay in the chat. Let us know where you're joining in from. We love to see that as well. We've designed the next 90 minutes to be with you and to take some Q&A at the very end. We've allowed for at least 25 minutes for Q&A. Tyler, great to see you from Wisconsin. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here in just a moment. All right, great. And close the chat out. Tiffany, welcome from Arizona, Illinois. Jennifer. All right, Lisa.
Hi. Well, I just want to say I'm looking at the chat. Sorry. I usually turn off the preview because I get so easily distracted by who's here. Oklahoma's in the house. But it's great to see everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time to out of your incredibly busy schedules to explore this topic of recruitment and retention with us. It certainly is the single biggest topic that we have gotten questions on, and it's not new. I mean, we started EMS Leadership Academy, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, over a decade ago, and that was the number one topic we were talking about then. So we're really excited to be sharing some big ideas. We like to call them sort of our secrets, big ideas, things you can implement rather quickly in your organization, and we're just excited to be here. So
yeah, absolutely. And hopefully the static cleared up on this end.
I don't hear it now, so go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. Just tell me if it cuts out again. As you can see, I'm joining you from space and out of the studio. I've got a little mobile setup here for our final live workshop. So yeah, great to see folks in the chat. Keep those comments coming. We love to just see what folks are thinking about as we deliver this information. And I'll tell you a quick little background about how the EMS Leadership Academy got started, a little bit of an origin story. As the president of a nonprofit organization, an ambulance service for almost 14 years, at times I felt pretty overwhelmed with the ideas of engagement, recruitment, retention. And it was no surprise. Most states say, here's an EMT curriculum, here's a paramedic curriculum. Good luck running an organization, right? It's no wonder why we were kind of trying to keep our heads above the water, to say. And I knew there had to be a better way. And if we didn't do something, we were definitely going to go underwater. And this led me to actually meet Lisa, and we began to do a few small interventions. And they say little hinges swing big doors, and they certainly did. The interventions we were able to do with some communication training, and then eventually some big picture vision exercises, getting current and future leaders together, exploring what do we really want in the organization, not based on the past and circumstances of what we think we could have. So really, that's where I think Lisa and I met up, and kind of that was the origin.
yeah, and my background is all in human performance, peak performance. Really, I've always been curious about how to bring out the best in people. Way back when I started my career in the field of human services, all the way till now, it still fascinates me. What brings out the best in humans, and so when you and I met, I knew that I could bring some ideas that I was working in large and small organizations, for-profits, nonprofits, even government agencies, and really had a lot of success. So we took a two-prong approach to your organization's issues. I was coaching you individually, but also providing, as you mentioned, some courses that allowed people to have insights and new ideas and to see communication in a whole new way. And the programs had value not only in their work, but certainly in their lives too. And we started to see people get energized right away. And I don't know if you want to share a little bit about some of the results, just so people can hear what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. The results were really incredible. We had people that started getting common language and they started understanding their role in the outcome. Folks that just stopped participating in petty conversations or gossip. They recognized that when they were falling into that trap, and it's a toxic trap. They, in a matter of 18 months after we created that vision of who we wanted to be in our community, we doubled the size of the organization. We went from 2 people, I think, contributing about 500 hours a year to 26 people contributing over 500 hours in a year. We had an alliance, things were going really well between paid staff and volunteers. We had an abundance of equipment, the newest and latest equipment. We had a whole building renovation, the exterior of the building, and actually won an award by the Historical Society. And since when does a place really get an award from a historical society for completely redoing the building? It was that bad. There was a little tree growing out of the side of the building. It was rotting so much. So, we went through some pretty big changes, and probably 99% of what we said we wanted in the future in 5 years came true within probably 18 months. So it was a pretty and we also doubled the municipal support from our town, and we had the full backing of a town board. So they got energized, they got excited about what we were doing as well.
Yeah, and it was interesting, you were getting all those calls from people asking, what are you drinking over there? What's in the
Yeah, what's in the
water?
water?
How come so many people are flocking to your organization? And that's when we realized we were truly onto something. And we formed EMS Leadership Academy to provide really actionable training. Theory is great, but what we're interested in is having people have a new experience on the court, so to speak, like in life, being able to take different actions and have, different results. So, our biggest goal has been to provide high quality difference making trainings, and we've been honing our message and honing our our programs. We really had an evolution from those early days when we worked when I worked with you on your organization to what we've created. And we've put in the hours and the time, the hours and the money, a lot of resources to really learn everything we possibly could about how to create organizations where people want to be a part of it, where people are thriving and it's sustainable. It's not just the flavor of the month.
Absolutely. And I got so excited about this and the results that we produced. I dove right into this. I really wanted to learn more about the science and the research behind performance and leadership in organizations. And, I flew to Cleveland every month for about 2 years. I did a master's degree in healthcare leadership and really got to train under some of these great folks that have been in the field of researching organizational performance and organizational psychology for over 50 years. So it was a real honor to be able to invest the time into learning from these people and then bringing that back to our industry. I think all too often we tend not to look outside of outside of our industry. And I was pretty excited when we could bring something, back into the world of EMS, and to come full circle, that one of our dreams was realized last year, that New York State chose us to develop an entire leadership curriculum for the entire state, for the State Bureau of EMS, to be distributed out across the entire to all agencies throughout the state. So coming from where I kind of started of, here's an EMT curriculum, good luck running an organization, to, hey, can you put this leadership curriculum together for our agencies, over 1,000 agencies in the state. So I'm really proud that we were able to do that work for them last year.
Absolutely. And, not only is it an honor to do that, but to be able to validate like the work that we were doing was show, we had the results to back it up. And so it's very exciting. And the thing we want to mention at this point is, as we dive into what some of these big secrets or big ideas. I always get that backwards. The secrets and or big ideas is the underlying premise is that transformational leadership is the key to effective recruitment and retention and lasting change. And that's something that, maybe doesn't sound revolutionary, but actually is, because so much of the energy that leaders and folks within organizations, and by the way, this isn't just in EMS, but we're talking about EMS, is it's focused on getting the right people, or trying to change the circumstances, or all the different reasons that people think about that cause issues around recruitment and retention. And we're going to dive into that somewhat. But what we assert, and what we would like everyone on this training to consider, is that transformational leadership is the key to effective recruitment and retention and lasting change. And when you stand in that place, that's going to make everything we talk about the rest of this training to be more powerful and more usable for you.
Right. We've distilled our frameworks to say that we've created based on what's been working in other organizations and what we find works best in most organizations that are, again, all human-centric organizations. Without people, we really have nothing in this work. So we've got three big ideas, three big frameworks to share with you over the next probably hour. An hour and a half, and we are going to talk a little bit about EMS Leadership Live, a 3-day training event where we don't get to spend just 90 minutes with you or 60 minutes with you right now. We get to expand that and actually do an entire live event with folks coming up just next week. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we want to take your questions. So if you have questions about what you feel like you're challenged with in your organization, and you want some on the spot coaching here, you've got some great resources. We'd love for you to save those questions till the end, and we'll take those questions. So folks in the chat, make sure you're still with us. Just give me an okay, and we'll get moving on to the first big idea that we're gonna share here, and the first big framework. So.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that everything we're talking about is something that you can, again, just start. It's not about, having to pay a lot or spend money or this or that. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, but we just wanted to, like you said, distill it down so that you could have actionable access to these ideas. And so, I think that's really exciting to know that you can start transforming and changing the issues of recruitment and retention right away.
Absolutely. So folks, give me an okay in the chat. Just type okay if you're good to move forward. Just making sure that, there we go, Tyler. Thanks, Eric. Excellent. So the first big idea we have here is a framework at a high level of how to really create a high performance leadership framework that can impact retention in your organization.
Yeah, exactly. And this framework or equation is different than what most people think. As we said earlier, the prevailing paradigm is that you have to get the right people. If you can get the right people, and then you can have a thriving organization, or then you can have retention. But it's actually, that's backwards. The way that you create a magnetic, thriving organization is it starts with you. And it's important for us to point out that when we talk about leaders, we're not talking about a position of power or a title. We're talking about anyone who declares themselves a leader. And it doesn't matter what your position is. You can affect change at any level. And we'll share some stories about that as we go on. But it starts with change at the level of self, really creating yourself to be the kind of leader that people want to follow, to give up those ideas that you have about leadership that you may have inherited. And I'm not saying give up and throw out, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but to be willing to examine them and see, is this way of thinking creating the results that I want? And that's one of our primary intentions in our work in the 3-day EMS Leadership Live is for people to start to see that they can declare themselves cause in the matter. So they stop blaming others and circumstances. I heard a long time ago from one of my coaches early on, he said, you can either have the results you want or you can have the reasons why not, but you cannot have both. So you can have the results or you can have the reasons. And because we don't understand that reasons are not truly the cause of anything, that's why it looks like, oh, the economy, or oh, the younger generation, or oh, the pay, or oh, this, that, and the other thing. Those become the reasons why not. And our work is about empowering you to transform that so that you can start to interact with the world from a place of being cause in the matter, taking ownership. And then that leads to the ability to develop others, and then helping them to take ownership for their role and who they are in the matter. And then from there, this third piece, I shouldn't jump over developing others because that's a huge component. And I think so much leadership training doesn't focus on this enough. So that's why I want to go back. If you think about, what it takes to develop others, most people don't feel equipped. There's advice giving or telling people what to do, and coaching people and coming from a place of discovery with people helps people to develop and grow. And then the third piece, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah,
I've been going on and on.
Well, and it's important that the order of this as well, because as a leader, are you telling other people that, you should really go to this training, you should really change yourself, and not willing to do it yourself? So that first step is so crucial. Before you start to tell other people that they need to change, really take an opportunity to invest in yourself so that you're able to see a new perspective, and then invite others to develop themselves and invest in those people. All too often, how many people have seen it over and over again that people get promoted to a leadership position without much training ahead of time? They do some damage, and then some leader thinks, oh, I think we should send them to some leadership training. It's after the fact, instead of giving them more tools for their leadership toolbox so that these preventable issues, you don't blow somebody right out of the water by saying something as a new supervisor. It's, here's your promotion and your gold badge. Good luck. Just because you were a good paramedic, just because you were good at your job, does not equate to being a leader that people want to follow. And I think when you get that third step, you get current and future leaders together where people, have a say in the future you want to create, right? If anything were possible, like we love this question, if anything were possible, what would you really want your organization to look like? If you had unlimited time and limited resources, what would you want? Not what do you think you can have, or what are all the problems that we can fix? Because you focus on problems, all you're going to get are more problems and roadblocks and reasons why not. Whereas if you can focus on intentionally creating the future instead of, uh, designed by default, right? You're just left with, you change nothing in your organization. More than likely, nothing's going to change. And so it's really getting ahead of it. It's taking the blinders off and getting people together to create a vision of the future that's so magnetic it draws people in. And again, I know we haven't talked much about recruitment and retention, but this is one of the keys to retention, right? People participate in this, current and future leaders, they suddenly have buy-in. So you're not struggling to come up with these great ideas as a leader and then try to convince everyone else why they should do this. People think that, people don't like change. People don't like change they're not a part of. So that's why this third step is so critical in the formula to really get that magnetic, thriving organization. Imagine transforming your organization to the point where, recruitment's a natural byproduct of a high performing organization, and retention, that, you're not recruiting people into this revolving door of an organization. Your leadership team isn't constantly trying to train people to the entry level and they're spinning their wheels because every time they finish training someone, what's happening? A bunch of people just left and you got to start all over again. The amount of energy that just zaps out of your leadership is just crazy.
Yeah, and it's like you said, creating an environment that's worthy of highly engaged members or high performing members. And again, most people aren't thinking that way because it's innocent, it's nobody's fault. It's just not the way we've been conditioned to think about this. So the key to this whole thing is what we said is like transformational leadership, right? Being the kind of leader that sees themselves as accountable and responsible for the results that are around them. And then, following this framework of transforming others and including others, intentionally designing, not by default, as you said, but those three things together is what creates this magnetic, thriving organization like you talked about, where people were coming 2 and 3 counties over just to be a part of your organization because they felt cared for and they felt alive and they were part of something bigger than themselves, which is one of the principles of bringing out the best in someone is feeling like you're a part of something beyond yourself. So
And while we're not going to talk about messaging much or as much about recruitment, um, nobody wants to join a sinking ship, right? People want to be part of a winning team in an organization. Tyler, I love your question. Isn't focusing on problem step one and identifying them? We'll if you could hold on to that question till the end, and it's a great question. Tiffany, totally understand. That's how most organizations promote people.
yeah, exactly. Um, I want to share a story just that demonstrates this, and I'll just share it quickly. But I was working with a healthcare organization that had 43% retention rate. So for every 100 people they brought through their training, only 43 made it the whole year. And they were training people in this organization. And just like you were saying, the morale of the office and managers, they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get better people, and it was this whole exhausting process. And they brought me in, and I started with the two owners of the healthcare organization, and they were a little resistant to that. They were like, no, we want you to fix our people, and I was like, no, that's not how this works. And so I coached them, and then they started to be different with their managers. And this was over a very short period of time. I came in and we did a retreat where we did the intentional design piece. And it was, for a group of people that were pretty disillusioned, it didn't take long for them in that retreat to see what they were putting in the way. And out of that, they started focusing on what they really wanted. Because I asked them that question: if you could have anything you wanted, if money and resources weren't a problem, what would you create? And it just opened up this amazing creative energy, and people started talking about it. And every time a yeah but or the problem with that is came up, we just put that aside. We said we will go there, but not now. And it was amazing. And the two owners were blown away by the ideas and what people wanted. And they thought these people were on the way out, but they just never had the space to share what what the ideas they had. And then we did a whole bunch of work on how do you create this. And so it's not just about, oh great, a nice vision for the wall, but that became the guiding document, you could say, for the organization. And so then we, through the lens of that document, that statement, we started redesigning everything within the organization. And the very first place we started was recruitment and onboarding, and everything from how the ads went out, how they were worded, to the interview process, the questions that were asked. They saw beyond a shadow of a doubt why they had such terrible issues with retention was because they had lowered the bar to get bodies, and everything was about getting bodies. And so they thought, oh, the training will take care of it. No, that's not how it works, right? So once they realized they were now recruiting people into an organization based on their vision, they were excited to recruit people, and they had a whole different lens. Within a year's time, they upped their recruitment. I'm sorry, their retention to over 63%. It was 63 point something percent in under a year. They were well above industry standards in their industry. And it was because they used that vision, that mission, that dream, you could say, that statement that they created to be a lens, if you will, or everything got looked at through that. Manager training, communication, everything was put through that lens, and it became a very very successful organization, thriving. And people were coming from other organizations to be a part of their organization because word spreads. It's cool to work here. It's great to work here. You feel cared for, you feel this, you feel that. And it was just an amazing experience. So it very quickly, I knew that I was onto something, that this wasn't just a good theory. This was actually how it worked. And that's just one organization over the many years I've done this, including yours and others that I've worked with, and ones that we've worked with where we've seen this happen, not just for a whole organization. I could go on and share the EMS story if you want, or unless you want to.
This one participant, Gary, came into one of our programs. It was a year-long program, and he was really excited to have change happen in his organization. He had been promoted to the position of a battalion chief, and it was in charge of now 6 or 7 different stations in a pretty big geographic area, 6 or 7 different crews. And he took on a learning mindset. He really was open to being willing to see a new perspective, which we're going to talk about next in Framework 2. So it was pretty excited to see, he got really curious about the source of disengagement and discovered, people really wanted to, what was missing after having conversations with people and going from station to station to listen to what people had to say, is that, recognition was missing, right? They were doing all these great things. It's so fascinating that the amount of people we truly do help in this industry, and we're so busy going from call to call to call, it's almost impossible for us to slow down and really recognize, the good that we're doing.
Yeah, and what was, I'm sorry.
Go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that was cool about that is that once he had that discovery, he had this great idea for, exactly how he was going to help his people feel more recognized and appreciated. And he was like, I have the answer. And then as he was putting it all together, he had this aha moment where he went, wait a minute, my good idea is not what's needed here. I want to reach out to these folks and my teams and get their input. What would make them feel appreciated and recognized? Not what I think, but what would make them feel. So he went back out and started asking questions about that. Like, what do you want? What would make you feel recognized? Not everybody wants the same thing. And so a few people volunteered to help. And next thing you know, we had a recognition and acknowledgement committee. And together they created a program, an idea, a structure for recognizing people. And not only was it highly effective, but he demonstrated that he was a leader who wanted people's input. He wasn't just going out and listening and then giving them his good idea. And he said it was a huge learning experience for him because, he would have just rolled out this idea, and the other reason I want to highlight this particular story is because sometimes you're not in a position to transform the whole organization like I was with that healthcare agency, or you were with your agency, right? And he wasn't either, but he could take on this one piece and he could transform it, and he did. And then he got promoted and promoted and promoted, and now he's in a much higher position. As I don't remember this title, but nonetheless, he has a much higher position because he because he kept demonstrating who he was as a leader, and the results were everywhere. So that's one of the things I think is important to highlight, is it doesn't have to be, you don't have to use that framework of self, others, and the, creating a future to be only for your organization. It could be for your ambulance crew, right? It could be for your committee that you're on. It could be for any part of the organization or any project that you want to take on. That framework works.
And it was exciting to watch him get promoted again to a position where now he could affect the entire organization instead of just his shift. So it's really great to see that change that happened with Gary. So the next big idea is, what we say is the missing ingredient for lasting change.
Yes. And, if you've ever personally or professionally had a good idea or had a thought, oh, I need to change this, I need to, exercise more, or I need to be more focused, or I need to be, have better time management, or whatever the goal is that you want, and you tried and you couldn't, consider that it's not your fault. This is the missing ingredient. This is why most people can start with change okay, but then it doesn't last. And it's because we don't understand how change actually happens. And I don't know, Robbie, if you could share the story of your one of the early
Sure,
transformations you had.
absolutely. And when I discovered this, at first it started out, I would present. Anyone else in here have to present to elected officials in the chat? I know, every year I would go down with my little milk crate, Tiffany, up, and I would present, explaining the difference. There's turnover even at the town or municipal level or city level. So you'd have to really help the people who hold the purse strings understand the difference and why we're between an EMT and a paramedic, and why it's important to invest in this in your community. And, I used to think it was all about the numbers. So I would have prepared numbers and fact sheets and budgets and explain the cost of things. Well, then a really good friend of mine and colleague, she said, sometimes it's not only the numbers, but it's the emotionally connecting stories. So, I was willing to try it out. And when I shared with them during the presentation about, a 39-year-old mother of two who had a sudden cardiac arrest at home, and her mother actually was with her and started CPR on her. Our paramedics got there within 3 to 4 minutes. They had the latest equipment. They had the mechanical CPR device. They had the latest training that when they got pulses back, they went to a hospital that could do therapeutic hypothermia. And this was early on in the world of, therapeutic hypothermia and the latest in resuscitation changes. So they bypassed that local hospital. They went to a PCI center. And because they did all of those things, because all the links in the chain of survival came together, those two little kids didn't have to go to their mom's funeral. They got to spend Christmas together in every Christmas sense with their mom and their family. So, I mean, that's why we invest in people coming to do training. That's why we invest in this equipment. That's why we have paramedics in our community with such a good response time. So while they may have forgotten the latest budget numbers and the facts and the cost per assessed thousand, they never forgot the story of what that all meant. So that was for me a big shift in sometimes information just being a barrier to people.
Yeah, and the great thing about, I mean, there's many great things about that story, especially since you had such a great success. But it just shows that you had a change of mind, and that's the missing ingredient for lasting change. If information were enough, we'd all be rich and thin, right? And most of us, and again, this is nobody's fault. This is just how we were kind of conditioned or taught to think, is that it's information that causes change. Except it's not true. If you look in your own life, just look for yourself and see, is it true? I 30 years ago smoked cigarettes, and I had all the information about how bad smoking was. That's not what caused me to quit smoking. It was a change of mind. There was just one day where it was like, no more. It didn't make sense anymore, right? It's like I had an aha moment. And then, that led to different actions that led to a different result. And here I am 30 years later. The thing about information is that it's all past based. So, if you're only focusing on information, you're projecting the past into the future. And so you're unlikely to get major results or major changes. You'll have incremental change, but keeping it is really, or making that change last is really difficult. Whereas transformation is in the area of what you don't know, you don't know. It's a blind spot. It's like a whole new perspective happens. Like you have a shift in your thinking, in your worldview. And so nothing in the world has actually changed, but everything looks different because you suddenly see life differently. And then that allows you to live life differently. And those are the two steps to lasting change. You have to see life differently and then live life differently. And that's one of the things that sets our programs apart, is that it's not about information. It's, as a matter of fact, information can be a barrier. If you think you know something, do you keep looking? Do you keep wondering about it? No, you already know. And the brain, evolved to skip over things it thinks it knows. There's been times during this training, I promise you, where you've had thoughts like, oh, this is like that, or I know this already, and then your brain kind of shuts down a little bit, and it creates a different, it's like you're not getting everything, because and again, that's not your fault. It's just what brains do. So it's really helpful to start to approach the world from a place of, what am I missing? Right? You assume that you don't have all the facts. You assume that there's more to learn than you can see. If you come from that state of that paradigm, not from, oh, I have to gather information, or I have all this information, so now I can, take on the situation. If you come from a place of curiosity, we call it a learner's mindset, right? Open to seeing what you're missing, then insights are possible. And when you have those insights and it's like, oh, I get it, like aha moment, right? Then new actions are possible, and the actions are sustainable.
Sorry to interrupt there.
That's
It just
okay.
reminds me of the story you shared about Corey, because he came in and he got curious with that learner's mindset, and then he discovered that, oh my gosh, they're lacking recognition. And then I feel like, if I remember correctly, he started to go down the road of, like you described, well, I'm going to do recognition for them. And when he was slowed down to say, well, it's a good insight, and like, what does recognition look like to them? And then he had that moment of, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I was about to give them what I thought people want, how people should be recognized. So again, it's one thing to have the insight, but the insight without the action, it's just
Mm.
it's just it doesn't create the results that I think most people are really after.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that, we all have these ideas about how we should be as a leader, or how people should be as a team, or how the organization should do, or I should, and you should, and he should, and she should, and they should, and blah, blah, blah. The infamous shoulding, right? We should on ourselves and we should on others. And that's all in the world of information. It's not helpful. It's just not if you're out to cause change. So if you can let go of all the shoulding and actually get curious about what works, or what might work, or what are you missing? Like, what is it you're not seeing? Then you relate to yourself and others completely differently. And it becomes exciting. It's not the burden of having to know all the answers. It's actually, oh, as a leader, my job is to discover what I don't already know. Like, there's no burden in that. There's just freedom to get, again, and curiosity is really the key.
I'm just curious for people listening and in the chat, think about your quality assurance and your QA programs or how people get feedback. Imagine if the people doing those QA reviews took on, this new mindset or, a learner's mindset or, not shoulding that, oh, you should have done it this way, you should have done it that way. Maybe it's just, the organizations I've been involved in. I don't know if that would help in the organizations that you're a part of, if you're watching this, but certainly, when you say that, I think the brain is so quick to jump to conclusions and to assume we have all the facts. And if there's one thing we know, it's that, we don't know a lot in these situations. Our brains are just quickly connecting the dots for us, and almost too quickly, like that gets us in trouble.
Absolutely. And like I said, the minute we've decided we know something, our brain stops looking for more information. So that's why we have to intentionally and actively be curious and just know that you never ever have all the information. It's impossible to have all the information. And so when you're making decisions based on a distorted worldview or a distorted view of the situation, then of course it's not gonna last. It can't. You don't have all the information. And so it's a important distinction that I hope people are hearing and are willing to test. And I know you just put up the Albert Einstein quote,
Sure.
which is one of my favorites. Um, this is attributed to Albert Einstein. He said that no problem can be solved from the same level of thinking that created it. We must learn to see the world anew. And that's really what we're talking about is, I work with a lot of executives and up and coming executives as a high performance coach. And one of the biggest downfalls is people think that if they just do more of what got them to that position, they're going to be successful. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. What you knew that got you here is not going to get you to the next level. And it certainly isn't going to have you be effective and successful at this level. But again, we just aren't taught this. And so people end up getting overwhelmed and feeling like they're drinking from a fire hose because they don't know that what's needed is a transformation. And it's not about working harder and longer hours. It's really about seeing the world newly and seeing the situation newly and seeing what new ideas and strategies emerge from that a new way of seeing things.
And our third big idea, just to foreshadow a little, is going to be you, if folks watching this, to experience what we're talking about when it comes to a transformational activity. So I know we keep throwing that word around, but it's such a important. It's so important to understand the why behind what we're talking about.
Yes.
And quickly, I think if we could just share a story of somebody that went through, one of our programs, we were delivering it in person, and he was in the front row, and I seem to remember as we're delivering a live training, we're looking at people's faces, and he was just very, he had kind of no affect and did not look like he really wanted to be there. His arms were crossed, like he had been around for 40 years in the organization, and he was just there for the numbers to support other people. And I remember him at the end of the training coming up to you and having a conversation. And so,
Yeah, it
you want to
blew
just
me
share that?
away because it's one of those times where you think, right? As an experienced trainer, I'm looking out and seeing the scowl thinking, oh, geez, didn't get through there, but, hopefully something landed, and we're wrapping up the day and you were talking to some people and I was doing whatever I was doing. And he came up to me and he said, Lisa, can I talk to you? And I thought, sure, but I wasn't quite sure what was coming. And he said, I just really want to thank you and Robbie too, because he said, this training changed my life. And I said, really? Tell me more. And he said that his son lived in his house with this man. His name was Wayne, if I remember correctly. And he had to talk to his son in 3 or 4 years. They lived in the same house
Yeah.
with him and his wife and their son, but he would not speak to his son. And he said the reason that he wouldn't speak to him was because he didn't approve of how his son lived, and he thought he should do this and he should do that, and he should be, he had this whole list of ways that his son disappointed him because he wasn't living up to his standards. And he had an insight. He had that moment, that aha moment, where he saw that he was projecting his past onto his son, and he was limiting his relationship dramatically. And he was blown away. And he told me that during lunch, he had actually called his son and asked him to have dinner, the two of them.
Mm.
And I said, "What did your son say?" And he said he thought that somebody was calling him to tell him I was dead, because he didn't think anybody, there's just no way his father was calling him.
Right.
So we laughed over that. But then he got very emotional and very moved, because he said, he couldn't see how he was going to reconcile this relationship with his son, and it broke his heart. And he realized that it was him, that he was the one, and that, it just changed everything. And he couldn't wait to have dinner with him and just share what he saw. And then I begged him. I said, "Will you please let me know how the dinner goes?" And he called me the next day and said that it was just the beginning of a whole new relationship, and he just couldn't thank us enough. And while this is a personal story, it's what's possible, right? It's like, there are people in your organization that you've decided, oh, they're never going to go for a change, or that person's stubborn, or that person's, a jerk, or this person's great, but their limitations are this. Like, we have categorized all these people, and it's all based on our past. And what was possible for Wade and his son was a whole new future, because he was willing to learn and be curious about who his son really was, and to give up his preconceived notions. And if you're willing as a leader to give up your preconceived notions about other people, and frankly, whether it's as a leader or as a husband, wife, daughter, sister, mother, whatever, if you're willing to give up your preconceived notions and actually get curious about the human being in front of you, it will change everything. And just think about how Wayne, moving forward as a senior leader in that department, he had this breakthrough with his son, but of course it's going to completely have a ripple effect for every single relationship he had in and outside of the agency.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that story. I love while we think a lot about professional development and, sending people to clinical training, we don't really do clinical training. We focus on the professional training. It has this bleed over effect into people's personal lives. And then they start to see where, the assumptions that they had about situations, where that's keeping them from having the results they really wanted. So, such a great point there.
And not to belabor the point, but just to say that that was one of the key things when you and I were working with the organization you were the president of.
Yeah.
We led communication training, and we told people it was going to have an effect both professionally and personally. And so many people came because that's what they wanted, was issues in their personal life. And they were so grateful for those breakthroughs, and they attached that to, they got it from this organization. Right. And so the gratefulness, it helped them to re-engage with the organization. So anyway.
Absolutely. So folks, we're going to move on to the third part here, where we want to actually not only just talk about and tell you about transformation, we want you to experience it for yourself. So give me an okay in the chat, give us an okay in the chat if you're still with us, and we will go into this next activity. Tara, thank you. Eric, Tyler, all right, Mark.
We're going to do an exercise that we do in our training, because like Robbie just said, we want you to experience transformation, not just talk about it. It's kind of like if you read the ingredients on a chocolate bar, right, or a bottle of wine, it doesn't give you the same experience as actually tasting the wine or the chocolate, right? It's like, so that's why talking about it is not all that helpful. And sometimes people think about transforming their relationships or their organization, and it looks like it's this big thing, like that last domino there. Well, this one little mindset change that we're going to talk about is only one little mindset change. There's lots of little mindset changes that you can have that will cause a big change in your organization, but we're going to focus on one for this next exercise. And this honestly will help you. Once you see this will help you dramatically, and I'm not overstating this, in your efforts to retain people, which is the key to recruitment. Okay. All right. So here's the exercise. So we request that you fill in the blank for yourself. I would be more successful or effective if I blank. So whatever comes to mind immediately, whatever's like the first thing you think, put that in the blank for yourself. And if you're comfortable, you can put it in the chat. You don't have to, but do this exercise, okay? Don't just be on the outside. Oh, I know this already. Give yourself the gift of transformation right here, right now, and put something in that blank for yourself. I would be more successful or effective if I, and let's see if anybody has put anything in the chat. So what would have you be more effective or successful? What's the very first thing that comes to mind?
And I know I've heard the results before, people would say, if I stop procrastinating, if
Yes,
I
that's a big
was
one.
a better speaker. Yep, Eric, had better time management. Yep,
Yeah.
good.
We also get more focused, more disciplined.
Mm.
Those are the kinds of things that people put in that blank. So I'm hoping, even if you're not adding it in the chat, that you're participating in the exercise. And we're going to come back to this question in a minute. But to prove to demonstrate the point, we're going to talk about something that's fictitious, right? It's just a story. It's just a demonstration. Okay. So I want you to pretend with us that for reasons we don't understand, we all have to be in a baseball throwing contest 30 days from today. I know it's weird, but just hang in there with me. Just pretend that we are being compelled to be in a baseball throwing contest 30 days from today. And our livelihood depends on how well we rank. So whether we can feed our kids, whether we can pay our mortgage or rent, or whether we can, pay our bills, all of those things is going to depend on how well we do in this baseball throwing contest. So there's a lot on the line here. And you're not going to have to work for the next 30 days. You're just going to train to be able to be in this contest. Now, obviously, again, this isn't true, but to make this, to give us a better shot, we're going to bring in the best baseball throwing coaches in the world to work with us. And the baseball throwing coach is going to come up to you and ask you one question. And the question is, which arm do you want to train with? So given the high stakes, everything's on the line, which arm would you say that you wanted to train with under those conditions?
Absolutely. And even if it's like the livelihood of your organization, right? Your whole organization's budget is contingent upon you performing well in this situation. What and you're training with that pro coach to win that game. What arm are you going to train with? Your strong dominant arm or your weak arm? Dominant. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And for most people, that's intuitive. It's like, duh, like they think it's a trick question that I'm asking, like, what do you mean? Of course, my dominant or strong arm, because intuitively we know that if we spent 30 days with someone who really knew how to throw a baseball on our strong arm or our dominant arm, then we would get better and better and better and have a better shot of ranking well in that. If we spent the same amount of time working on our weak arm, we'd be lucky if we could get it as strong as our other arm is now. And that would be very hard work. It's true that our greatest area of learning and our greatest success come from our areas of strength. And when we talk about throwing, sometimes we use the example of writing, left-handed or right-handed, but we just know when it comes to something physical, of course, we're going to go with our strength. Now look back at this question. Did you put a strength in there or did you put a weakness in there? Whatever response, was it a strength? Was it something you're strong at, or was it a weakness?
And certainly based on the answers I saw come through in the chat, they certainly sounded like weaknesses.
Yeah. And again, that's nobody's fault. That's just how we've been trained, right? Earlier, somebody asked, well, don't you have to identify the problem? Isn't that the first step? Yeah, that's the paradigm that we've been pickled in, right? That's the conditioning we have, is if you want to be more successful or effective, you have to fix your problems or fix your weaknesses, except that's not accurate. That is what we've been taught to do. That's not the best way to become effective or successful. The most successful and effective people in the world, high performers, know they focus on their strengths. Their weaknesses are either managed or become irrelevant. That they focus on their strengths, they hire for their weaknesses. They work on mastering their strengths, developing their strengths, honing their strengths. And they don't do a lot with their weaknesses. And if you think about the baseball throwing contest, why would you spend time on your weak arm? It only takes away time from doing what works best. And the same is true for us with our whatever our strengths are. We're not saying ignore your weaknesses or ignore the weaknesses of the people around you, right? This is also about developing the people around you. But we're saying, why are you solely focusing on them? It's not your fault. It's because the paradigm we've been pickled in is fix your weaknesses, your strengths will take care of themselves. Except that's just wrong. It's just backwards. It was the paradigm came about before the neuroscience caught up with it, right? It's like there was a time when we thought illnesses were caused by evil spirits. I don't mean we, but humans thought that, right? And they lived consistent with that. And it took a long time, even after germs were discovered, for people to start to live consistent with, oh, it's about germs, it's not evil spirits. Well, the same thing here. There is a underlying way of thinking that, oh, I have to focus on my weaknesses. Another one of my favorite quotes is by a coach I know called, his name is Jamie Smart. And he says, if being hard on yourself was going to work, it would have worked already. And I like to say, if focusing on your weaknesses was going to work, it would have worked already. Because that's what we do, right? We don't know what our strengths are, and we don't know how to develop our strengths. And that's something I'm passionate about, and I know you are too, Robbie, is helping people to see the strengths in themselves and others, and to learn and master those strengths so that their weaknesses are either irrelevant or they have people on their team with complementary strengths, right?
Absolutely.
So if you start to see that all strengths are created equal, right? It's not like, oh, those strengths are better than my strengths. No, all strengths are created equal. And you just got the ones you got. And when you start to develop them and get interested in them and get curious about them, it's amazing how fast the learning comes. How it's absolutely amazing.
And again, drawing this back to recruitment and retention, if you shift your focus, on people's strengths and what's working in your organization, it's a no cost way to increase your retention results, right? And if you increase your retention results, your need for recruitment becomes so much less, and your recruitment becomes so much more efficient. And honestly, the predictable future is if you do nothing differently, you're going to get the same results. So we're inviting you to think differently and produce different results, to think about the framework we shared in step one, and really think about how, the barriers we put in place are, they're past based. They're often getting in the way of people I think, fully contributing in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is think about how much you like being, to everyone on this call or training, how much you like when people are pointing out your faults and all the things that you're weak at, right? None of us like that. It's like, no, thank you, right? But because we're not trained in this, that's what we do as managers and supervisors and as leaders, is we're trying to develop the people around us, and we're doing it through weaknesses, which has people feel demoralized. It's not your intention. It doesn't matter. It's just that's just what happens, right? And when you start to slow down and get curious about, like, oh, well, what are the strengths of this person? How can I develop more of those? How can I help that person go from novice to mastery with their strengths? It changes everything because people feel appreciated. They feel like they're seen, they're acknowledged. And it's like you said, no cost, right? But the transformation here is the opportunity to see the paradigm of weakness. It's
Mhm.
not yours. You didn't invent that. You were born into that conversation. And now the transformation is to actually see that and be like, oh my God, yes, that's the water I've been swimming in. Let me shift. Let me practice and start to identify strengths in myself and others, and then see what that leads to.
So again, this third concept, it was all designed to give you a taste of what it's like to have, an insight. And we want you to see that often if we think that we're going to be more successful or effective, that we by default we tend to rely on our weaknesses and trying to just get incrementally better instead of developing a team of leaders focused on what people are good at. They have complementary strengths, and your organization can excel so much quicker. Again, this is just one taste of what it's like to see something differently.
Absolutely.
Do you want to skip
And
ahead for this?
sure. I was
Okay.
just gonna, but go ahead.
So folks, we want to put a fine point on the cost of, the cost of retention and the cost of high turnover. And we have numbers here from the American Ambulance Association's Newton 360 annual turnover study showing direct costs involved. Because one of the biggest complaints we get is, we don't have the money if we want to invest in people, and we need to pay more to recruit more people. It's a huge, fallacy out there. We're not saying that. Organizations shouldn't pay people more. We think people in this industry should be paid so much more. And at the same time, it's one of those little excuses that gets used. So we want to point to the direct costs, and what Scott Moore, who's one of the principals behind this annual study, has found is the cost of hiring, onboarding, the benefits, the uniforms, the training. It's about $9,100 per person for every person that walks out of that organization. That's how much it's costing. Not to mention the indirect costs, which are astronomical. They say 150% of somebody's annual salary. And when you go up to the losing a supervisor or somebody at the executive level, you're talking about 200 to 400% of indirect costs. And just think about all of your leadership in the organization that's focused on constantly onboarding and bringing people into the organization and training people to the entry level. What could they be doing differently if they weren't so worried about having to onboard and train so many people? That's where we talk about the indirect costs. And the report points to that our industry sees a 20 to 30% turnover in most EMS organizations. And Scott says, I think Scott Moore pointed out that by 2023, the number could be high as 30% nationally in an organization. So that's kind of scary. And every 3 to 4 years, almost 100% of your organization could potentially turn over. Um, so yeah, it's certainly a staggering number. And in the chat, just drop in the chat how many people are in your organization. I'm just curious how many people. Looks like Tiffany already has a turnover percent. Yeah, 31%. But how many people are in your organization? Just curious to see that number in the chat. Yeah, 36, 25. So if you look at, they say never to do math on live, but times 25% times 9,100. So, Tiffany, 36 people, 25% turnovers, 9,100 a piece. That's $81,000. And actually, you've got the turnover number. It's 31%. So it's $101,000 that your organization's spending every year. Jennifer, 20 people, 20 people times 0.25 times 9,100. Yeah, Jennifer, your organization is spending over $45,000 a year on turnover. So when you have some of these numbers, it's fascinating to look at how much this is actually costing your organization.
And that's just direct, right? That doesn't cost overtime with other employees having to work more and all the indirect costs. So that's a crazy number when you think about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what we've created tonight, what we are created in this training, I would say, is the opportunity to impact that by being the kind of leader that people want to follow, right? Those 3 secrets or big ideas that we shared, each one of them is designed to or intended to allow you to transform yourself as a leader, right? Because that's the key to the recruitment and retention issues, is being the kind of leader people want to follow.
And as we're nearing the end of this training, I hope you're really excited about applying these ideas and wondering maybe what the next steps could be. So we've put together a program that really talks about, or that really takes leaders through these systems to create lasting change. So I hope it's okay if we spend just a few minutes. We do want to get to people's live Q&A here for the last 20 minutes and talk a little bit about EMS Leadership Live. We talked at the beginning of this session about our live event. It's a 3-day curriculum, a 3-day training event next week, actually, that we've been leading up to November 15th, 16th, and 17th. We understand folks out there, we've got a lot of DIYers, people that want to do it themselves, and they're going to take the information from today and they're going to, think about it. They're going to hopefully apply it. And there's other people that might want some more support. So for those folks that we put this 3-day program together next week in order to give you a front row seat to some high quality training that doesn't involve getting on a plane, traveling. You get to remote in, and we actually get to see your faces live in our studio. We've got an entire studio set up with a whole wall of television, so we can see everyone's face, and we can put you into breakout rooms. You can take what you're applying and share it with other people. We did this back in February, and it really had some great results. So to go into an organization, we've been approached. It's easily 100 to, or I'm sorry, 100, 10 to $20,000 for on-site training. And what organization here could get 15 to 25 people in a room, given current staffing crises and staffing levels? And so we're not obviously going to charge that. For the 3 days, we considered, we think it's totally worth $997 for attending 3 days of this high quality training and the experience, but we've come to the price of $197 for general admission to EMS Leadership Live. So we'd like to just play you a quick reel of what that's about and then get into any Q&A.
Welcome to the EMS Leadership Live virtual training.
Leadership is not just a competency, it's also a system.
And with our new challenges with recruitment and retention, we definitely have to come up with some really revolutionary, transformational things to solve these problems.
Can't expect everyone else to change if you're not willing and open to see a new perspective, to change yourself, to refine.
We can strategize all we want, but setting the culture in order is what matters.
The blind spots, just what about the things I don't know that I don't know?
When we think about retention and attrition rates across the board, we need leaders who really embody the ups and downs of resiliency and how to cultivate well-being.
Well, I am so excited to be live in the studio next week with folks. We did this back in February and had such great results. Hearing from people that just hit the ground running after that event. And one just followed up with us recently that she was recruiting 20 new people into her organization after spending a good 6 months working on the culture and working on change initiatives within the organization.
Yes, and we often get the question about the time. It starts at 11 a.m. and it goes to 7 p.m. Eastern. We pick those times because we get people from all over the world, and with all the different time zones, it seems to be the best time from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. Last year in February, we had 5 people from Alaska, and they really appreciated that we were starting at 11 because most of the time, there were other trainings they were getting up way before the sun. Anyway, so yeah, it just allows people to participate from all over, and think about that too, because people are remoting in, but there's a lot of interaction and exercise that you do in small groups via Zoom, and so you get to connect with people from all over the world, and without having to leave the comfort of your own home. You don't have the extra travel costs. You get to tuck your kids in at night or sleep in your own bed, however you want to think about it. There's ample time for breaks, and we really have developed this so that you get the most possible bang for your buck, so to speak.
Absolutely. And if all this did was just save one person from leaving your organization, we hope that it would be worth it, right? We pointed that $9,100 cost. And, if this helped you train and develop yourself to be more effective as a leader, as a supervisor in your organization, even to just improve other areas of your life, we hope that you would see that this is worth it, the investment of your time. Because we know it's not just about the money, always. It's often the time that you're going to invest in spending and slowing down as a leader. I mean, all too often organizations, they're operating in emergency mode. It's how they handle calls. So it's, how they handle everything. And we just invite you to slow down, to take those 3 days, to invest in yourself, to invest in your organization. And we hope that, this enlivens you, people who attend. We've seen it happen, that it helps you create more engagement with your leaders to prevent burnout. And we hope you see that as being worth the time.
And if the 3 days are really designed to create that magnetic, thriving organization. The first day is realize, and as the title is, day is realize, and that's the developing yourself, development at the level of self. And then the second day is all about optimizing, and that's where you create the ability to develop others and to begin to think about how do you design those areas that you want to impact. How do you design them so that they give you the results you want? And then the last day is about how do you take an idea and make it a reality. How do you go from making something from an idea to a project to a result? And we give you the third day is systemize. Whatever. It's about actualizing, right? It's getting things from a concept into reality, and you'll leave there with a plan of action. And that has been really valuable for people. And for folks that are attending these trainings, we have a special gift, you could say, is we are including a follow-up session where how you go to a conference, you go to training, and you're all whoop whoop enthusiastic, and you got that contact high, right? And then you get back to your office and it's like, wait, what? And so this extra session is designed to really support you in implementation and taking what you got out of the training and being as effective as possible with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we don't start with the tips, the tricks, and the strategies first. We want people to, again, see a new perspective, really get a good understanding for why they're learning a certain way, and how their behavior has a ripple effect, how it impacts others. And we do a lot on day 2 about holding people accountable. I don't know how many times we get replies of what people are challenged with, and it's, how do you hold people accountable? So we really dive into that on day 2. And I love the activities that are planned for day 2 because it gets people out of the mindset of, problem fixing mode, which they've been pickled into, what do we really want to create? How do we get a group, rallying around a common cause and a common purpose?
Well, I want to take, it's a good moment to answer Jennifer's question in the chat. She said, so how do we address what they do need to improve if it's something that really needs, and she's got really in caps, so must really need improvement on. And that's a wonderful question, Jennifer, and I can share a little bit about that, but this is something we definitely dive into on day 2, because, you know, we have this language and a whole bunch of, you know, ways of thinking about weaknesses, and we don't have language and how to have conversations for strengths. We're just not versed in that. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful question. And the very, very, very first thing that I would recommend is that you get curious, that you work with the person and you sit down with them and find out how they see things, because whatever they're doing, it makes sense to them. Doesn't make sense to you, and that's okay, but it makes sense to them. So if you have someone who the way they're doing things makes sense to them, and what you're doing is bringing your knowledge of how things make sense to you, this is what the communication, this is a metaphor for what the communication is like. You are not on the same wavelength. So to transform that, to have a different result, you actually have to approach it with a lot of curiosity and wonder with the person, how did they come to that conclusion? Like, not from a how did you come to that, but like a real gentle, reflective, sort of relaxed conversation about, here's what I'm seeing, here's how I'm seeing you do this, and it's not working. So can you talk to me about, what had you think that was the, why does this make sense to you, or something like that? And then you'll start to see how they connect the dots. And then when you see that, that's when it's possible to have a transformational conversation, because it's like, oh, I see. You thought A, B, and C, when really it's D, E, and F. Oh, then that allows for true communication, because now you're dealing with what's actually at play. When we only offer our good idea, it misses the boat, because we're not standing in their understanding. We're not looking from where they're looking from. And so that's why advice almost never works.
So Lisa, I thought I'd bring Jennifer on as a panelist and promote her to panelist if she'd want to, unmute her. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like, Jennifer, and you're welcome to turn your video on if you'd like. And welcome.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Hi. Sorry if it gets a little loud. My kids are a little crazy, but so my issue is, and this may be a little bit negative thinking, and I don't try to make this negative thinking, but I do have some younger generation employees, and it kind of seems like the work ethic is a little different with 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds. Some of them are late to work, to shift, and I'm not just talking like 2-3 minutes late. I'm talking like 10, 15, 20 minutes late. And of course, with the perils of shortages in EMS, it's like, oh my gosh, like, I can't really fire you because I need you, but it doesn't set well with some of the other people that are a little older, have a better work ethic, knowing that, you can't make a habit of being at work super late to relieve the other crew. I've talked to them. I'm like, what can I do to help you? What do I need to do to help you get to work on time? Is it something that we need to create a whole new, like a different shift time for you? Is it, what do I need to do? I've done the suspension. I've done, like these two individuals are up for basically termination if it continues. And then I'm just like, oh my gosh. So, and I don't want to lose them. And they're completely aware of the situation. They know. They're like, I know that we're late. I really try hard. I went to go and buy a alarm clock that's loud enough to wake me up, but I just sleep through them. And I'm like, you would think if I like suspended you for 2 to 3 shifts in a row where you were not even getting a paycheck, you may try something to wake up and get to work on time.
Yeah. Well, is it okay if I just share some thoughts?
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. I don't know that I have the answer. I mean, that's, I don't know. But what I would thought, what comes to mind as you're talking is that, when we lay on top of the facts, right? The facts are the person is showing up or coming to work at a particular time. And what we often do is lay on a conclusion word or a conclusion about them. So now it becomes they have a work ethic problem, right? Which then complicates things, because not only do you have to handle the person's not coming to work on time, but now you got to deal with another layer, and then how do you deal with that, and how do you deal with that, rather than actually looking for what are the facts, right? Like, what is the time that the person is supposed to be there? What is the time they're showing up? I mean, I love the fact that you're asking questions about what can we do and like that. The other thing that might be helpful is to ask them, like, if they had a plane to catch, would they be on time for that? Right? There's some place where it still makes sense to them to be late. Like there's some justification. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? Like,
Right.
we all do it, right? I mean, anybody who's ever tried to lose weight, right? You go on a eating program, but it's my birthday. So then, okay, it's okay to eat cake, or, it's Halloween, so I can have candy, right? So we all have, even though we're committed as all get out to lose weight, we can justify it. Oh, well, there's a holiday. Is this making sense, Jennifer? Oh, she just went mute.
Sorry, Jennifer, you're just
okay.
on mute, but it's a great question. We hear it all the time from other people. How do you hold people accountable in these situations? And Lisa, I love this. In the past, you've also given the great advice of using the phrase, it doesn't work when blank. It doesn't work when you show up late. It doesn't work, and sticking to the facts, like you said, you were late this many times on these dates. That doesn't work.
Yeah. And then, again, I think that can be helpful, because when you see accountability as a way of developing people versus as a way of punishing people, and that's a key distinction, right? Like, in the program that we have developed and deliver it's about accountability as a tool for developing people. And I do think the framework of what right and wrong isn't helpful, but whether it works or doesn't work is a more helpful context. And I think that's the point you were making, right? It's like, it doesn't work when you're late. These are the consequences to us as a team when you're late. But what I was trying to point to around if you've not missed a plane, right? Or you had to be at a test, like to take your test to be a paramedic or EMT, like what was it that had you be there and show up and be on time? Because that will point to the relationship that they had to their word in that situation is different than their relationship to their word in their work. And that's not about ethics. That's just about, I suppose you could make that case it's about ethics, but what's important to see here is that it's the relationship to what comes out of their mouth that's the challenge here, because there's still some place where they're justified in not being on time. So that's what I would get curious about.
And Lisa, I heard you also point to the things we layer on into it, because I heard in Jennifer explaining the situation, the generational issues. Like, we start to layer on all these other issues, and then it becomes this almost impossible thing to solve. And we take it one step further. We start to label other people that are 19, 20 years old and calling, oh, they're going to have a work ethic issue. I don't even think I want to hire them, right? If you
Yeah.
hired me when I was 19 or 20, you would have had a great employee that showed up early every time. So if somebody had just labeled me a certain way and not hired me, um, honestly, they would have missed out. And, I think I also hear a tinge of, well, we really need those people. I can't fire them because Tiffany points to it. Tyler points to it. Maybe termination is the right result because it's going to have a negative effect on other people if it does get to that. So it's an interesting thing that we don't just need warm bodies in organizations. Yes, we need to fill the schedule, but those are all other compounding issues, I feel like, that get layered onto this one situation.
Well, and I think the other thing there is to see, like, okay, this is a potential valuable asset that needs developing. I mean, we all had our first job, right? We all were 18 or 19 once. And thank goodness, I had people and managers who were willing to work with me, because God knows, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You know what I mean? At that age, I had good ideas about what I thought I knew, but I'm grateful for the people who guided me and supported me and weren't harsh, because I was sometimes showed up like an idiot. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know. I just didn't know. So, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm not saying it's, at some point it doesn't make sense to have somebody feel or deal with the consequences. I think every situation is unique, but I think what's possible and what the point I'm out to make here is that the coming with a learner's mindset, getting curious, not about necessarily why they're being late or not late or what. It's more being curious about who this person is and how they see reality, because that'll point to something. And when you see that, then that allows you to take actions that are actually going to make sense. And one of the actions might be to terminate the person, or one of the actions might be, they have a misunderstanding. So, I think as leaders, if we can start to see ourselves as coaches who lead, people who are out to train and develop the people around us. Like, what if that's our number one job, is to have the other people around us be successful? Then that just changes the nature of the conversation.
And what might be missing is, maybe there's an understanding that 15 minutes is on time is late. That 15 minutes early is on time is late. So that people start to get the impact that showing up even 15 minutes, 10 minutes early might actually be considered late to other people. And if they start to see that, and they start to see the impact that, when you get to the end of your shift, if somebody doesn't show up on time, it has a ripple effect on other people. So sometimes it's just the awareness that I don't think people really get the impact that they have, or maybe they don't think they're important as well. So
Yeah.
I hear again a lot of things in the chat going on. Being a top performer in your organization and setting high expectations. I don't think there's anything wrong with setting high expectations. And maybe it's your whole process of onboarding and interviewing. And okay, are you looking for warm bodies, or are you looking for people who are high performers? Do you set the expectations higher? Do you set the bar higher than it is when people come into the organization? There's an understanding that every day you will do a rig check, that the equipment will be inventoried, that you're going to be 15 minutes early to relieve that night crew or that day crew. So setting those expectations really early is a structure you can put in place that's going to have a different result.
Yeah, and I just think, I don't know that there's a one size fits all answer. I mean, I think I agree that, high standards are essential. That's high performers are looking for that. And also you have to ask yourself, if you have people that you want to mold into high performers, right? Or are you expecting that everyone who comes through your door is going to be a high performer, right? Like every high performance organization, has some kind of program to get people to that level. They don't necessarily have people, roll in from high school as high performers or college grads, right? I mean, it's part of the onboarding and the training and development, and it might just be pointing to something that's missing, like you said.
I think too, it goes back to maybe Tyler's original question about trying to fix the problems. Think about the 98% of the organization that is showing up early and that's showing up on time. What are we most distracted by? It's the 2% of the people, or maybe the bottom, 10% of your organization, the squeaky wheels, the ones who, you gave them a gold desk, they complain that it's too heavy. So it's like, where are you focusing your time and energy on? And we're not saying it should be 100% either way, but maybe just focusing a little bit on the ones that are working well. What is it about the situation? What is it about how they were onboarded, how they were trained, that they're, they're a go-getter. They're the ones that are reliable in your organization.
Yeah, that's an important point. And I think too, it's even seeing the lateness as a problem to solve is actually not helpful. It's not the problem. There's an upstream problem. That's the thing I think that's missing, is that you're seeing a result called late and you're dealing with that. That isn't the problem. There's an upstream issue. There's a way of thinking that's leading to late. And that's what I would get curious about, right? Or like what's at the source of this? And not just their way of thinking, but also like, okay, what did we miss as an organization that this is the result we're producing, right? And like you said, you're focused, two people out of however many, you got a lot of people who are doing great.
Tyler does share about, that research that shows like you got the bottom probably third of your organization. I think it's about 10 to 15% of your organization are the actively disengaged folks. Gallup research is the one that shares this statistic. And then you've got, your 10 to 20% of high performers, and everybody in between, they could be pulled in either direction. So wherever you're focusing your attention on, those people in the middle will probably get pulled in that direction. So if you're, you're only focused on the low performers, the people in the middle are probably not going to, the cream is not going to rise to the top there. If you focus on what's working in your organization, you acknowledge people feel valued, the high performers, people are going to see that and they're going to want more of that. And then the middle begins to shift. So completely agree, Tyler. It's a great Gallup research statistic we share in one of the programs, I think on day 2. So.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. It was a great question,
folks.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking it, and some good discussion. And wherever you're left with the question, my request is that you wonder about it. That's for everybody, right? Because sometimes we approach it like, oh, I know the answer. And I think that is limiting. But if you can actually look at the question and be like, oh, well, one possible answer is this, but what else? Like, what other thoughts come to mind? What other ideas? Again, that's the learner's mindset that allows for transformation. If we just say, oh, I know how I would handle that, those two guys and blah, 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 then there's no room for growth and discovery. And you're on this training because you're interested in growth and discovery. So that's the mindset that will allow more growth and discovery.
Well, folks, that's we're a little bit over on time. Thanks for joining us here for our 90-minute free training. And this is the last one of the year. Next week, we'll be at EMS Leadership Live. So hopefully you have a chance to grab your ticket at emsleadershipacademy.com/live. If you have any questions, send us an email, support@emsleadershipacademy.com. And we hope to get to see you, in that front row come next week. We're excited about the studio setup and having another one of these big events.
And there's still plenty of time to register. So if you have any questions at all about that, give us a shout. It was really a pleasure spending time with you. Appreciate your interactions and your engagement. And you know, if you got anything out of this training at all, we'd love to hear from you and let us know how, you know, a couple days down the road, what's opening up for you out of being in this training. But just imagine if you got to spend 3 whole days diving into this topic of transformational leadership, recruitment, retention, and engagement, and creating a thriving organization. That's really an exciting topic to be engaged in.
All right, folks, thanks for everything you do in your community. Thanks for being here, and we will see you